He was one of the richest men in the valley. But the day he followed his sons into the fields, he realized something terrifying. They weren't waiting for him anymore. They were waiting for someone else. A poor young woman, a maid, sitting in the dirt, holding his children like she was the only safe place they had left. And when those boys finally spoke, they didn't scream, they didn't cry. They revealed a truth that broke their father without raising their voices. Because sometimes, silence hurts more than betrayal. If you believe family should come before everything, make sure you subscribe. Because stories like this remind us what truly matters. Matthew hadn't seen his sons properly in months. Not really. Yes, he lived in the same grand estate. Yes, he signed the checks, paid for everything, built an empire that guaranteed their future. But being present and being there were two very different things. That morning, the air in the Shenandoah Valley was crisp. Rows of apple trees stretched endlessly across his land, glowing under soft sunlight. It was peaceful. Quiet. Too quiet. He wasn't supposed to be here this early. His schedule was packed like always. Meetings, calls, numbers, decisions. But something felt off. A strange instinct pulled him toward the orchard. And that's when he saw them. His two sons, sitting on the ground. Not inside the mansion. Not with tutors. Not under the watch of strict staff. They were outside, in the dirt. And between them sat Daisy, the maid. A poor girl from a nearby farm. Someone Matthew barely knew beyond payroll records and brief nods in the hallway. But here, she wasn't just a maid. She had one arm around Benjamin, the younger one, and the other resting gently near Nathan. Both boys held small baskets filled with apples. And they were smiling. Not the forced smiles Matthew had grown used to seeing at the dinner table. Real ones. Warm. Calm. Safe. Matthew stopped walking. Something about the scene didn't feel right. Or maybe it felt too right. Nathan looked up first. His expression didn't light up with excitement. No running, no shouting, "Dad." Just quiet recognition. "We stay out here," Nathan said simply. Matthew frowned slightly. "Why?" Benjamin answered this time, his voice soft but steady. "Because Daisy listens to us." The words landed heavier than they should have. Matthew glanced at Daisy. She didn't stand up. Didn't rush to explain herself. Didn't act nervous like most staff did around him. She just stayed there. Calm. Present. Letting the boys speak. Benjamin continued, looking down at his basket. "Inside, everyone tells us to wait. Or go to our rooms." Nathan added quietly, "Or they say you're busy." Matthew felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even guilt yet. It was realization. A slow, uncomfortable awareness that something had been breaking inside his home, and he hadn't even noticed. He stepped closer, his expensive shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. "And Daisy listens?" he asked. Benjamin nodded. "She listens till the end. No hesitation. No exaggeration. Just truth." Matthew looked at her again. This time, really looked. She was young. Simple clothes. No jewelry. No sign of wealth or status. But her presence, it was steady. Grounded. She didn't try to impress him. Didn't seek approval. She was just there, for his sons. "Did you bring them out here?" Matthew asked. Daisy met his gaze without fear. "I did." Her voice was calm. Respectful, but not submissive. They were restless this morning. The house felt heavy for them. Matthew's jaw tightened slightly. "And you thought this was better?" "I thought they needed to breathe," she replied. Not pretend everything was fine. There was no accusation in her tone. But somehow, It hit harder than any criticism. Matthew turned back to his sons. "Is there something you wanted to tell me?" The boys exchanged a look, a silent agreement. Then Benjamin spoke. "We wanted to know why you almost never stay with us." The question was simple, but it cut deep. Matthew closed his eyes for a moment. For months, he had convinced himself he was doing everything right, working harder, building more, securing their future. That was love, wasn't it? Providing, protecting. But standing here now, in the quiet dirt of his own land, he realized something painful. He had been building walls, not a family. "I thought," Matthew began slowly, his voice heavier now, "I thought I was taking care of everything." Nathan looked at him carefully. "You saw us," he said, then added, without emotion, "but you always walked away fast. No anger, no tears, just a fact. And somehow that made it worse." Matthew felt his chest tighten. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a powerful man. He felt like a father who had failed. Slowly, he lowered himself down, sitting in the dirt across from them, not above them, not as a boss, but as someone who needed to listen. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I failed you." Benjamin looked straight at him. "Are you going to change?" The question hung in the air, heavy, unforgiving. Matthew nodded. Yes. Nathan didn't look convinced. His small hands tightened around the basket. "You said that before." The words were soft, but they carried history. Broken promises. Missed moments. Matthew swallowed hard. "I know," he admitted, "and I understand why you don't believe me." Silence filled the orchard. Even the wind seemed to pause. Daisy shifted slightly, her hand resting gently on Benjamin's shoulder, not interfering, just grounding him. Then she spoke. "If you want to prove it to them—" Matthew looked at her. Her eyes were steady, clear. "You should start by staying right here. No drama, no pressure, just truth." Matthew looked at his sons, then at the rows of trees, then back at the woman who, somehow, understood his children better than he did. And in that moment, he made a decision. "I'm staying." But deep inside, even he didn't know yet, if staying for 1 hour could fix everything he had already broken. Matthew stayed. At first, it felt unnatural. He wasn't used to being still. His life had always been movement, decisions, deadlines, constant urgency. Even when he sat, his mind kept running somewhere else. But here, sitting in the dirt beside his sons, time slowed down. Benjamin started talking first. He pointed at the rows of trees like they were treasures. "This one has the sweetest apples," he said, reaching into his basket. "Daisy showed us how to tell which ones are ready." Nathan added quietly, "And if you pick too early, they taste bitter." Matthew listened, really listened, not half paying attention, not nodding while thinking about emails. For the first time in months, maybe longer, he focused on every word. Benjamin handed him an apple. "Try it." Matthew hesitated for a second, then took it. The skin was warm from the sun, slightly rough. He took a bite. It was simple, fresh, sweet. Nothing like the polished, perfect fruit served inside the mansion. And somehow, it tasted better. Benjamin smiled, watching his reaction like it mattered. Matthew swallowed slowly. "It's good," he said. Nathan studied him carefully, like he was testing something deeper than taste. "You're really staying?" Nathan asked. Matthew met his eyes. "I am." There was a pause. Not disbelief this time. More like cautious hope. Daisy adjusted one of the baskets nearby, quietly giving them space, but still close enough that the boys felt her presence. Matthew noticed it. She never interrupted, never took over. She simply supported. And that made everything easier. Benjamin started explaining how to sort the apples, which ones to keep, which ones to discard. He spoke with confidence, repeating things he had clearly learned from Daisy. Matthew followed his instructions, placing apples into separate piles, his movements slower, unfamiliar, but willing. Nathan kept watching him. Every small action, every word, as if measuring whether this version of his father was real or temporary. Time passed without Matthew noticing. No phone, no interruptions, just voices, wind, and the soft rustle of leaves. And something inside him shifted. He realized something uncomfortable. It wasn't hard to be here. It never had been. He had just chosen not to be. The thought hit him harder than anything his sons had said, because it meant the distance between them wasn't caused by work. It was caused by him. Benjamin suddenly laughed. "I slipped right there yesterday," he said, pointing to a muddy patch. Nathan smirked. He fell hard. Matthew smiled faintly. "When?" "Yesterday morning," Benjamin said. "Daisy helped me up." Matthew glanced at her again. She met his eyes briefly, then looked away, continuing her work. No pride, no need for recognition, just quiet consistency. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but earned trust. The sun slowly began to lower. The golden light stretched across the orchard, wrapping everything in warmth. Benjamin wiped his hands on his pants. "Are you going to eat dinner with us tonight?" The question came casually, but Matthew could hear what was behind it. A test. A hope they weren't ready to fully trust yet. "I will," Matthew said. Nathan didn't look convinced. "Without your phone?" Matthew exhaled softly. "Without my phone." Another pause. Then something small, but powerful. Nathan nodded. Just once. Daisy stood up, brushing the dirt from her apron. "Then we should head back," she said gently. "You both need to wash up." Benjamin jumped to his feet immediately. "I got the most apples today," he said proudly. Nathan stood more slowly. Matthew reached out his hand without thinking. Nathan looked at it. For a moment, Matthew thought he might refuse. But then, the boy took it. A simple gesture. But it carried weight. Matthew felt it. They started walking back toward the house. Benjamin ran ahead, still talking about his harvest. Nathan stayed close, his hand still in his father's. And Daisy walked beside them. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside. Balanced. Matthew glanced at her again as they walked. There was something about her presence. Something steady, grounded. Something his life had been missing. He didn't fully understand it yet. But he felt it. That evening, Matthew kept his promise. For once, he was already at the table before the boys arrived. The dining room looked the same. Polished wood, perfect arrangements, quiet elegance. But something was different. Matthew had asked for simple food. No formal service. No distractions. And most importantly, no phone. When Benjamin and Nathan walked in, they paused. Surprised. Like they weren't sure if this was real. "You're here already?" Benjamin asked. Matthew smiled slightly. "I told you I would be." They sat down slowly. At first, the silence felt awkward. Careful. Like everyone was waiting for the moment to break. But then Benjamin started talking about the orchard again. And Nathan mentioned a drawing he had been working on. Little by little, the tension softened. Their voices became more natural, more alive, and something Matthew hadn't heard in a long time. Laughter. Real laughter. Benjamin suddenly said, "Daisy told me I was holding the basket wrong." Nathan added, "She told me I complain too much when I'm waiting." Matthew listened. The way they spoke about her. It wasn't just respect. It was trust. Deep trust. The kind they used to have with him. And instead of jealousy, Matthew felt something unexpected. Gratitude. "Do you really like her that much?" he asked. Benjamin didn't hesitate. "She stays with us." Nathan looked at his plate, then added quietly, "And she always tells the truth." Matthew nodded slowly. That one sentence. It stayed with him. After dinner, as the boys left the table, Matthew stood there for a moment, absorbing everything. Then he stepped out into the hallway. And that's when he saw her. Daisy was standing in the pantry doorway, organizing something on the shelf. She looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. But something passed between them. Not words. Something quieter. Something aware. As if she was measuring him. Watching to see if this change would last. Matthew held her gaze just a second longer. Then gave a small nod. And walked away. But as he moved down the hallway, one thought stayed with him. If his sons were finally starting to feel safe again, then the real question wasn't just about being a better father anymore. It was about the woman who had quietly stepped into the space he had abandoned, and what that might mean for everything that came next. The next morning, something unusual happened. Matthew woke up before his alarm. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, the quiet pressing gently around him. No calls. No urgency. No noise from the world outside. Just silence. And then a thought. The orchard. His sons. Daisy. He sat up. It wasn't a decision driven by responsibility this time. It was something else. Something quieter, but stronger. He got dressed without checking his phone. Left it on the nightstand. And walked downstairs. The house felt different in the early hours. Softer. Less rigid. The kind of quiet that didn't feel empty. Just waiting. Matthew stepped into the dining room and picked up a newspaper, more out of habit than interest. He sat down. And waited. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps. Fast ones. Benjamin rushed in first, stopping mid-step when he saw him. "You're here again?" Matthew lowered the paper slightly. "I said I would be." Nathan followed behind, slower, more observant. His eyes moved from the table to his father, then back again, like he was checking if this was real for the second time. "You didn't leave?" Nathan asked. Matthew gave a small smile. "Not this time." The boys exchanged a quick look. Something unspoken passed between them again. Then they sat down. Breakfast wasn't anything special. Simple food. No formal service. But something about it felt important. Benjamin started talking about what they planned to do later. Nathan added a few quiet comments. And Matthew stayed present, responding, asking small questions, listening. It wasn't perfect. There were pauses. Moments where Matthew almost drifted out of habit. But each time, he caught himself. And came back. Midway through breakfast, Daisy stepped into the room. She paused for a second. Just a second. But Matthew noticed. She hadn't expected this. Not like this. Her eyes moved from the boys to him, then back again. Matthew gave a small nod. Nothing dramatic. Just acknowledgement. She returned it, then continued walking, retrieving something from a cabinet before quietly leaving again. No words. But something had shifted, and both of them knew it. The rest of the day moved differently. Matthew didn't disappear into endless meetings. He rearranged things, pushed calls, delayed decisions that could wait. For the first time in a long time, he chose time over pressure. That evening, he knocked on Benjamin's bedroom door. A small action, but one he hadn't done in months. Benjamin looked up, surprised. "Hey," Matthew said softly. "Hey." Matthew stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Benjamin's voice dropped slightly. "I missed her today." Matthew's chest tightened. He knew exactly who he meant. The room felt heavier instantly. But this time, Matthew didn't stand up, didn't walk away, didn't change the subject. He stayed. "I missed her too," he said quietly. Benjamin looked up, surprised, confused. "Then, why did you always leave when I talked about her?" The question wasn't accusing. It was honest. Matthew swallowed. Because this time, he couldn't hide behind excuses. "I didn't know how to stay," he admitted. "It hurt too much." Benjamin stared at him. "Does it still hurt?" Matthew nodded. "Yeah." There was a long pause. Then Benjamin asked something even softer. "Are you gonna leave now?" Matthew shook his head. "No." And this time, he meant it. Benjamin leaned back slightly, his shoulders relaxing just a little. Not fully, but enough. A small crack in the wall. Later that night, Matthew stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet again. But not empty. Different. He walked past one of the guest rooms and paused. The door was slightly open. Inside, the light was on. Daisy was there, folding linens. Alone. Matthew hesitated for a second, then knocked lightly against the door. She looked up. Yes. Her tone was calm. Professional. Like always. "How do you do it?" Matthew asked. She frowned slightly. "Do what?" "With them," he said. "How do you keep them calm?" Daisy placed the folded sheet down. She didn't answer immediately. She thought about it, then said quietly, "I don't try to control how they feel." Matthew leaned slightly against the doorframe. "What do you mean?" "I let them feel it," she said. "All of it." Her eyes met his. "I just make sure they're not alone while they do." The words settled into the room. Simple, but heavy. Matthew looked down for a moment, processing, then back at her. "That sounds harder than it should be." "It is," she said honestly. "But telling someone to stop feeling something doesn't make it go away. It just teaches them to hide it." Matthew exhaled slowly. There was truth in that. The kind you couldn't argue with. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Daisy gave a faint, almost distant smile. "Life teaches you things when you don't have a choice." Matthew studied her. For the first time, he wasn't just seeing her as someone who helped his children. He was starting to see the weight she carried, the quiet strength behind her calm. "You've been here a while?" he asked. "Almost a year." "And before that?" She hesitated, just for a moment, then answered simply, "My family has a small farm, not far from here." Matthew nodded. "And you left?" "My father got sick," she said. "Things changed." There was no drama in her voice, no self-pity, just fact. "I had to work." Matthew didn't respond immediately, because suddenly, the difference between them felt very real. He built wealth. She carried responsibility. Different worlds. Same ground. "Were you studying something?" he asked. Daisy's eyes flickered slightly. I was. What? Agricultural management. Matthew raised an eyebrow. That's specific. A small smile touched her lips. I like understanding how things grow. Matthew looked at her differently now. Not just as someone who cared, but someone who understood. Systems, balance, life. That explains a lot, he said quietly. Daisy didn't reply, but something softened in her expression. Just slightly. Then, from down the hallway, a voice called out, Dad. Nathan. Matthew straightened. I should go. Daisy nodded. Yes. He stepped away from the door, then paused, looked back at her. For a brief second, neither spoke. But something unspoken lingered. Something new. Something neither of them had planned. And as Matthew walked toward his son's voice, he realized something he hadn't expected. This wasn't just about fixing his relationship with his children anymore. Because somewhere between the orchard, the quiet conversations, and the way she understood what he didn't, something else had begun. Something that, if he wasn't careful, could change everything. Matthew followed Nathan's voice down the hallway. The boy was standing by his bedroom door, holding a piece of paper in his hand, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Can you look at this? Nathan asked. Matthew stepped closer. Of course. Nathan handed him the paper. It was a drawing. Crayons. Rough lines. Simple shapes. But the meaning behind it wasn't simple at all. Matthew's eyes moved slowly across the page. Two small figures sitting on the ground. Between them, Daisy. And off in the distance, a much larger figure, standing far away, alone. Matthew's chest tightened. That's me, he said quietly. Nathan nodded. Matthew swallowed, his voice lower now. When did you draw this? Before, Nathan said. When you didn't stay. There was no blame in his tone. Just truth. Matthew crouched down, bringing himself to Nathan's level. And if you drew it now? Nathan didn't answer right away. He looked at the paper, then at his father. You're closer, he said finally. A pause. But still kind of far. Matthew felt that one. Not as a wound, but as something real. Something that could still change. He nodded slowly. Then I guess I've got some work to do. Nathan studied his face for a second longer, then gave a small nod of his own. Not full trust, but movement. And right now, that was enough. Matthew handed the drawing back carefully. Can I come in for a bit? He asked. Nathan stepped aside. Matthew sat on the edge of the bed again. This time, the silence didn't feel heavy. Just quiet. Nathan sat across from him, holding the drawing. You're really trying, he said. Matthew looked at him. I am. Nathan hesitated, then asked something that carried more weight than anything before. Are you gonna stop again? Matthew didn't answer right away, because this time he knew the answer mattered. I might mess up sometimes, he said honestly. But I'm not gonna stop trying. Nathan held his gaze, measuring, then slowly. He nodded. That night, something shifted again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeper. A quiet step forward. The next morning, Matthew was there again. And the morning after that. And the one after that. Not perfect, but consistent. He showed up for breakfast, walked with them in the afternoons, sat with them at night, and slowly, the house began to feel different, less like a place people lived in, more like a place people belonged. Daisy noticed it. Of course she did. She saw the small things, The way Benjamin laughed more easily. The way Nathan spoke a little more. The way Matthew paused before leaving a room, like he was choosing to stay instead. She kept her distance. Not physically, but emotionally. Careful. Measured. Because she understood something Matthew was only beginning to realize. This wasn't just about healing. It was about balance. And balance could break if pushed too far. One afternoon, Matthew found her in a storage room, organizing supplies. He leaned against the doorway. "You notice everything, don't you?" Daisy didn't look up immediately. "I pay attention," she said simply. Matthew stepped inside. "The boys are different. They feel safer," she replied. Matthew nodded slowly. "And me?" Daisy finally looked at him. "You're trying." A pause. "That matters." Matthew held her gaze. There was something steady in her eyes. Not admiration. Not judgment. Just clarity. "I want to understand them better," he said. Daisy set down what she was holding. "Then listen when they're quiet," she said. Matthew frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "They don't always say what they feel out loud," she explained. "Benjamin talks more when he's anxious. Nathan gets quieter." Matthew processed that. "And I missed all that." Daisy didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. Matthew exhaled. "I thought providing everything was enough." "It's not," she said gently. He nodded. "I know that now." There was a pause. Then Matthew asked something that shifted the air slightly. "What about you?" Daisy's expression changed, just a little. "What about me?" "You understand all of this so well," he said. "Who listens to you?" The question caught her off guard. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she gave a small, controlled smile. "I manage." Matthew didn't look convinced. "That doesn't sound like an answer." "It's the only one I have," she replied. There was no bitterness, just truth. Matthew studied her. He saw it now. The exhaustion she never showed. The weight she carried quietly. The strength that didn't ask for recognition. And something about that stayed with him. "Do you ever stop working?" he asked. Daisy gave a faint breath of a laugh. "When it's possible. And when it's not, we do what needs to be done." Matthew shook his head slightly. "You say that like it's easy." "It's not easy," she said. "It's just necessary." The words lingered between them. Heavy. Real. Matthew stepped a little closer. "Do you want to go back?" he asked. "To studying." For the first time, something flickered in her expression. A quiet spark. "Yes," she said softly. "Then why haven't you?" Daisy looked down for a moment. "Life doesn't always wait for you to be ready." Matthew nodded slowly. He understood that in his own way. But not like she did. Not with the same cost. From down the hall, laughter echoed. Benjamin's voice. Nathan's. The sound pulled both of them back. Daisy stepped away slightly. "I should go." Matthew didn't stop her. But as she moved past him, he said quietly, "You deserve more than just managing." She paused, just for a second, then continued walking. But something in her steps had changed. And Matthew stood there, alone in the quiet room, realizing something he hadn't planned for. He had started this journey trying to become a better father. But somewhere along the way, he had begun to care about someone else's future too. And he didn't know yet if that was going to heal his world, or complicate it in ways he wasn't ready for. That evening, the orchard called them back again. It had become a quiet habit now. Not planned. Not scheduled. Just something they kept returning to. Benjamin was already there, kneeling in the dirt, sorting apples with careful focus. Nathan sat beside him, quieter as always, watching the sky change colors as the sun slowly dipped lower. Daisy stood a few steps away, adjusting one of the baskets, her movements calm, familiar. Matthew walked toward them. This time, he didn't hesitate. He didn't stand at a distance. He walked straight in and sat down beside them, like he belonged there. Benjamin looked up and smiled. "You came again." Matthew gave a small nod. "I said I would." Nathan glanced at him, then back at the horizon. "You keep saying things and doing them now." Matthew noticed the difference in his tone. Less doubt. Still cautious. But softer. "I'm trying to make that a habit," Matthew said. Benjamin picked up an apple and tossed it lightly into his basket. "You should have started that a long time ago." Matthew didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. "You're right," he said. And that mattered. Because for the first time, his sons weren't just hearing promises. They were hearing truth. The kind that didn't try to sound perfect. The kind that admitted it had been wrong. Daisy moved closer, placing another empty basket down. "You're running out of space," she said to Benjamin. He grinned. "That's because I'm better at this now." Nathan shook his head slightly. "You just rush more." "I don't rush," Benjamin protested. "I'm fast." Matthew watched them. The way they argued. The way they laughed. It felt normal, simple, and somehow more valuable than anything he had spent years building. "Daisy says you have to be patient," Nathan added. Benjamin rolled his eyes. "She says that about everything." Matthew glanced at Daisy. "Is that true?" She met his gaze briefly. "Patience usually makes things better," she said. Matthew let out a quiet breath. "I'm learning that." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable. Just real. Then Benjamin suddenly asked, "Were you always busy like this?" Matthew looked at him. "Like what?" "Working all the time," Benjamin said. Matthew leaned back slightly, resting his hands in the dirt. "For a long time, yeah." "Why?" Nathan asked. The question was simple. But the answer wasn't. Matthew stared at the rows of trees ahead. "I thought, if I worked hard enough, I could make sure nothing bad ever happened to us again." Nathan frowned. "But bad things already happened." Matthew's chest tightened. "Yes," he said quietly. "And working more didn't fix it." Matthew shook his head. "No." The silence that followed was heavier this time. Because now they were standing in it together. Not avoiding it. Not hiding from it. Benjamin spoke again, softer now. "When she died, everything changed." Matthew closed his eyes for a second. The memory still hit hard. Still sharp. "I know," he said. "You changed too," Nathan added. Matthew opened his eyes. "I did." Another pause. Then Benjamin looked at him carefully. "Are you gonna leave again, if it gets hard?" Matthew felt the weight of that question settle deep. He turned to face them fully. "No," he said. Nathan didn't look away this time. "Even if it hurts?" Matthew nodded. "Especially then." Daisy stood quietly nearby. She didn't interrupt, but she listened, and something in her expression softened. Just a little. The wind moved gently through the trees. The light shifted, and for a moment, everything felt still, like the world had paused just long enough for something important to settle into place. Benjamin broke the silence again. "Then you should come here more," he said. "This place is better." Matthew smiled faintly. I'm starting to understand that. Nathan added quietly, "It's easier to talk out here." Matthew looked around. The open space. The quiet. No walls. No pressure. "Yeah," he said. "It is." Daisy stepped forward slightly. "It's because no one feels trapped here," she said. Matthew glanced at her. "That's a good way to put it." She didn't respond, but her eyes held his for a second longer than usual, and something passed between them again. Something quiet. Something growing. Benjamin stood up, stretching. "I'm hungry." Nathan nodded. "Me too." Daisy brushed her hands off. "Then let's go." They started walking back together. Benjamin ran ahead again. Nathan stayed close. Matthew walked beside Daisy this time. Not planned. Just natural. For a few steps, neither of them spoke. Then Matthew said quietly, "You were right." Daisy looked at him. "About what?" "Staying," he said. "It's where everything started changing." Daisy's expression didn't shift much, but her voice softened slightly. "It's where you chose to stop running." Matthew exhaled. "That's not easy to hear." "It's not supposed to be easy," she replied. Another few steps passed. Then Matthew asked, "Do you think I can fix this?" Daisy didn't answer immediately. She looked ahead, at the boys walking in front of them, then back at him. "You're not fixing something broken," she said. Matthew frowned slightly. "Then what am I doing?" "You're building something new," she replied. "And that takes time." Matthew nodded slowly. "That sounds harder." "It is." They reached the steps of the house. Benjamin was already at the door, trying to open it. Nathan stood beside him, waiting. Daisy moved ahead to help. Matthew stayed back for a second, watching, taking it in. His sons, laughing, waiting, living, and the woman who had helped bring that back into their lives. Something tightened in his chest again. But this time, it wasn't guilt. It was something else. Something warmer. Something dangerous. Because it wasn't just about gratitude anymore. And he knew it. As they stepped inside, Daisy held the door open. Matthew walked past her. But for a brief second, their shoulders almost touched, and neither of them moved away immediately. It was small, barely noticeable, but it lingered. And as Matthew walked further into the house, one thought stayed with him. If this continued, if he kept changing, if this connection kept growing, then sooner or later, he would have to face something he wasn't ready to admit yet, that the line between fixing his family and changing his life completely was already starting to disappear. That night, Matthew didn't go back to his office. The door stayed closed. The phone stayed untouched. Instead, he sat in the living room long after the boys had gone to bed, the quiet wrapping around him like something unfamiliar, but needed. 4 years, silence had felt like pressure. Now, it felt like space. Space to think. Space to feel things he had spent months avoiding. His eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward the rooms where his sons slept. For the first time in a long time, he knew exactly where they were. Not physically, emotionally. And he knew how close he still was to losing that again if he wasn't careful. A soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. Footsteps. He turned his head. Daisy was passing through the hallway, carrying a folded blanket. She hadn't expected him to be there. Neither of them spoke at first. The moment lingered. Then Matthew stood slowly. "You're still working?" he asked. Daisy adjusted the blanket in her arms. "There's always something left to do." Matthew watched her for a second. You don't have to do everything alone. Daisy gave a faint, almost tired smile. I'm used to it. Matthew stepped a little closer. That doesn't mean you should be. She looked at him. Really looked this time. And for a brief moment, something deeper surfaced in her eyes. Not distance. Not control. Something more human. You're not used to people like me, she said quietly. Matthew frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means, she continued, her voice steady, you solve problems with resources. I solve them with endurance. The words settled heavily between them. Matthew didn't argue. Because she wasn't wrong. I'm trying to understand that, he said. Daisy nodded once. I can see that. There was a pause. Longer this time. And something about it felt different. Less guarded. More real. Matthew glanced down at the blanket. Who's that for? Nathan, she said. He kicked his off earlier. Matthew let out a quiet breath. I'll take it. Daisy hesitated. Just for a second. Then handed it to him. Their fingers brushed slightly. Neither of them pulled away immediately. It wasn't intentional. But it wasn't nothing either. Matthew took the blanket and walked down the hallway. He pushed Nathan's door open gently. The boy was asleep, curled slightly, the quiet rhythm of his breathing filling the room. Matthew stepped closer and carefully placed the blanket over him. For a moment, he just stood there, watching. Something about the simplicity of it hit him deeper than anything else. This was what he had been missing. Not big gestures. Not success. Just being here. He adjusted the blanket slightly, then stepped back. As he turned to leave, Nathan shifted slightly in his sleep, his hand brushing against Matthew's wrist. It was unconscious. Unintentional. But Matthew froze for a second. Then slowly, gently, he let his hand rest there for just a moment longer, before pulling away. When he stepped back into the hallway, Daisy was still there, waiting, not intruding, just present. He's asleep, Matthew said softly. Daisy nodded. I know. Matthew looked at her. You check on them often? Yes. Why? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Daisy didn't react defensively. She just answered. Because no one should feel alone when they're hurting. Matthew held her gaze. And you? Daisy's expression didn't change much, but something in her eyes shifted again. I've learned to handle it. Matthew shook his head slightly. That's not the same thing. No, she said. It's not. Another pause. But this one carried weight. Unspoken things. Unasked questions. Matthew took a step closer. Why do you stay? He asked. The question hung between them. Daisy didn't answer right away. She looked down the hallway, toward the boys' rooms, then back at him. Because they need someone who won't leave. Matthew felt that, deep. And you trust me to become that person? He asked. Daisy studied him. I'm waiting to see if you will. The honesty in her voice left no room for comfort, only truth. Matthew nodded slowly. That's fair. There was a long silence after that. Neither of them moved. Neither of them needed to. Then Daisy stepped back slightly. I should finish up. Matthew didn't stop her. But as she walked past him, he said quietly, You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. She paused, just for a second. Her back still turned. Then she continued walking. But her steps weren't as steady as before. Matthew stood there, watching her disappear down the hallway. And something settled inside him. Something he couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just about change. It wasn't just about redemption. It was becoming something more complicated. Because now, there was something to lose again. And that made everything harder. The next few days moved forward with that quiet tension growing beneath the surface. Matthew stayed consistent. Morning, evening, small moments. He didn't break his rhythm. Not this time. And the boys felt it. Benjamin grew more open, more expressive, his laughter coming easier. Nathan took longer. But he started speaking more. Sitting closer. Watching less, and trusting more. Daisy noticed all of it. But she also noticed something else. The way Matthew's attention lingered. Not just on the boys. On her. It wasn't obvious. Not inappropriate. But it was there. In the way he listened when she spoke. In the way he paused when she entered a room. In the way silence between them no longer felt neutral. And that worried her. Because she understood something Matthew hadn't fully faced yet. This wasn't a simple line to cross. This wasn't just emotion. This was difference. In status. In life. In consequences. One mistake for him could be managed. One mistake for her could cost everything. One afternoon, she found herself alone in the pantry. For the first time in days, she allowed her composure to slip slightly. Just for a second. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes. Taking a breath. Trying to steady something inside her that was starting to move. But then, footsteps. She opened her eyes immediately. Matthew. Standing in the doorway. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at her. And in that moment, he saw it. Not the calm version of her. Not the steady, controlled presence. But the weight she carried underneath it all. And something in his expression changed. Softened. Deepened. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Daisy straightened slightly. Composed again. "I'm fine." Matthew didn't move. Didn't accept it. "You don't look fine." Daisy met his gaze. And for the first time, there was something fragile there. Something real. "Some things don't change just because life gets a little better," she said. Matthew stepped inside slowly. "What doesn't change?" Daisy hesitated. Then said softly, "The cost of being in the wrong place, with the wrong feelings." The words landed between them. Heavy. Clear. And suddenly, the space between them didn't feel safe anymore. It felt dangerous. Matthew understood. Maybe not completely, but enough. And as he stood there, looking at her, he realized something that made his chest tighten. This wasn't just about whether he could change. It was about whether the world around them would even allow it. Matthew didn't step back. Not this time. The silence between them held everything that had been building for weeks, maybe longer. Daisy stood still, her hands lightly resting against the counter, her composure steady on the outside, but not untouched. Matthew took one slow step closer. "I'm not afraid of that," he said quietly. Daisy looked at him. "You should be." "Why?" he asked. "Because you don't pay the same price," she replied. "You can walk through this and keep your name, your position, your world. I can lose everything." The truth in her voice didn't shake. It didn't accuse. It just existed. Matthew nodded slowly. "I know." Daisy's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you?" "I didn't before," he admitted. "But I do now." There was a pause. Long enough for both of them to feel the weight of what stood between them. Then Matthew spoke again. "I won't let that happen." Daisy shook her head gently. "That's exactly what I mean," she said. "You think you can fix it?" protect it, control it. Matthew exhaled. No, I'm saying I won't hide from it. That shifted something. Slightly. Daisy held his gaze. And what does that look like to you? Matthew didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about impulse anymore. This wasn't about emotion alone. This was about choice. And consequence. It looks like doing things the right way, he said finally. Even if it's harder. Daisy studied him. And if doing things the right way still costs me everything? Matthew's voice softened. Then I'll stand there with you when it does. The words settled deep. For the first time. Daisy didn't respond immediately. Because she heard something different in his voice. Not promise. Not control. Commitment. But still. She stepped back slightly. Words are easy, Matthew. I know, he said. And I'm done relying on them. The next morning, everything changed. Not in a loud way. Not in a dramatic confrontation. But in something far more powerful. Matthew called a full meeting. Staff. Management. Everyone. The room filled with quiet tension. No one knew why. But everyone felt something was coming. Matthew stood at the front. Come. Clear. Present. This house, he began, his voice steady, runs on more than structure and rules. It runs on people. Silence filled the space. And I've allowed something to happen here. That ends today. A few glances were exchanged. Uncertainty. Expectation. No one in this house will ever be judged, moved, or treated differently because of rumors, he continued. Not now. Not ever. Daisy stood at the back. Still. Listening. If anyone has a problem with the way someone does their job, Matthew said, they can bring it directly to me. Otherwise, it ends. The room stayed silent. Because everyone understood. He wasn't speaking generally. He was drawing a line. And then, he took it further. We're launching a program for anyone working here who wants to continue their education, he said. Equal opportunity. Transparent access. No favoritism. A shift moved through the room. Not shock. Recognition. Because this wasn't about one person anymore. This was about dignity. For everyone. Matthew's gaze moved briefly, just briefly, to Daisy. Then back to the room. And if I hear one more word that disrespects someone's work, their effort, or their place here, that person will not be part of this house anymore. Silence followed. Clean. Clear. Final. Daisy felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. Not because he protected her, but because he removed the need for protection. He didn't lift her above anyone. He leveled the ground. That evening, the air felt different. Lighter. Calmer. But something still remained. Unspoken. Matthew found her outside. Near the orchard. The same place where everything had started. She was standing there, looking out across the trees. He didn't walk too close. Not yet. Did I do it right? He asked. Daisy turned slightly. Her eyes met his. You did it fairly, she said. Matthew nodded. That matters more. A small silence passed. Then Matthew took a step closer. Can I ask you something again? Daisy didn't look away. You can ask. Matthew held her gaze. If I keep doing this the right way, will you stay? Daisy's breath caught slightly. Not visible, but real. I'll stay, she said softly. Matthew stepped closer. And will you let me try to be something more in your life? Daisy's eyes flickered. Emotion and caution. I'll let you try, she said. But not at the cost of who I am. Matthew nodded immediately. Never. A pause. Then Daisy added, "And not at the cost of them." Matthew looked toward the house, toward his sons. "Never," he repeated. Time passed. Not quickly, not easily, but steadily. Matthew didn't rush anything. He stayed consistent. Morning after morning, evening after evening. He showed up. Not perfectly, but honestly. And that mattered more. Benjamin trusted it first. His laughter grew louder. His energy returned. Nathan took longer. But one day, without hesitation, he reached for his father's hand again, and didn't let go. Daisy watched all of it, carefully, quietly, and slowly. Her walls began to soften. Not fall, but open. Because she saw something she hadn't believed in for a long time. Not just change, but consistency. Not just words, but proof. Months later, the orchard looked the same. But everything else had changed. Benjamin and Nathan sat on the ground again. Not because they needed to escape the house, but because they wanted to be there. Daisy stood nearby. Matthew walked toward them. And this time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He sat down beside them. Benjamin grinned. "You finally got good at this." Matthew smiled. "I had good teachers." Nathan looked at him. "You stayed." Matthew nodded. "I did." Then he looked at Daisy. Really looked at her. Not as someone who filled a space. They leaned into him. Not out of need, but out of love. And Daisy stood there. Not in the background. Not in the shadows. But as part of the life they had built. Together. And for the first time, everything made sense. Because love wasn't something you proved once. It was something you showed every single day. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. And tell me in the comments which part of the world you're watching from.